evening to you. I'm Gail King. 100 years ago today, one of the ugliest chapters in American history took place. The massacre of as many as 300 black people by their white neighbors and the destruction of the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Greenwood was a source of pride for blacks back in 1921. Famed educator Booker T. Washington coined the business district the Negro Wall Street because it was so prosperous and rich with many black-owned businesses. Tonight, we will explore what happened that day. What was behind the single worst incident of racial violence in American history? Survivors, descendants, and historians try to explain why it happened and how the city and the country still struggle to move on from this tragedy. So here's a question. What did happen on May 31st, 1921?
Black History Month, right?
The Greenwood District was a segregated residential and economic district because it had to be, because of legal segregation that prevailed, not just in Tulsa, but really all over much of the United States.
They built schools, they built churches, they were educated, they were organized, they had social clubs. It was a vibrant community. They had their own businesses.
These are mostly small businesses, all concentrated in this 35 square block area that abutted downtown Tulsa, separated by the Frisco tracks.
But there was tremendous
Black Wall Street.
resentment, white resentment to the economic success of Greenwood. Whites understood that economic prosperity would ultimately lead to questions of racial equality, social equality. Racial equality, social equality was a non-starter. Segregation was the rule of the land.
What was life like in Greenwood then? I asked two survivors of the 1921 massacre. Viola Fletcher is 107.
Well, we had friends and played outside and visit with neighbors and was happy there with our parents. Just loved being there.
And 106-year-old Leslie Benningfield Randall. What was it like before the men came in with guns? What were there stores? Was there movies?
It getting to be a pretty nice place. They had theater and they had other places of recreation and they had churches. And they came in and toured all down.
There were approximately 200 businesses in Greenwood circa 1921, and not one of those businesses are left standing.
The 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre occurs, triggered, catalyzed by an event between two teenagers, a black teenage boy, Dick Rowland, 19 years old, who shined shoes downtown, a white girl, Sarah Page, 17 years old, who operated an elevator in a downtown building called the Drexel Building.
We don't know exactly what actually happens, but upon entering, we think he may have tripped and bumped into the white elevator operator, Sarah Page. She screams.
The clerk from a nearby store comes to her rescue, and Dick Rowland did what any normal African American would have done. He ran. And he ran to Greenwood. Before the day was over, he was arrested and brought to the county jail, which, of course, is on the south side of the tracks, in the midst of the white business district.
The Tulsa Tribune published an article entitled "Nab Negro for Attacking Girl in an Elevator."
The newspaper, the white newspapers, implies that there needs to be a lynching tonight. And so black World War I veterans come down to the courthouse to protect this young man from being lynched.
One of the white men in the crowd attempts to disarm one of the, we believe, black veterans. A shot is fired, it hits a white bystander, and they began firing upon the black man.
In the words of a number of survivors of the massacre, all hell broke loose after that. The violence lasted roughly 16 hours. Black men in the Greenwood community put up a vigorous, albeit short-lived, defense. They were outnumbered, outgunned.
The sheriff has deputized a number of white citizens who have no training in law enforcement, mob control, they have now been given legal permission to participate in mayhem, looting, and murdering.
The original looters.
Some of the people in the Greenwood community
had
fine
the
things
original
like
looters
pianos and china and so forth.
This one-on-one
breaking
history.
people's houses and just destructive.
Looting, burning shit down. They the original looters.
And they was giving notice out on the street, leave town, they're killing all of the black people.
Who was helping them fight?
My mother looked out
for
the
black
front
folk, man.
door.
Where they at, yo?
And she saw
You can do these
4
videos
men
all day
with
long.
torches
No other
walking
races
from
coming
the
to our
street
aid to help us.
sidewalk
God damn it.
to our house. And all of a sudden, she says, all of you get up under the bed, quick.
Understand me?
All of us scrambled. They came in and set fire to the curtains. And one stepped on my fingers.
Heathens,
and my
heathens.
sister put her hand
The original
over my
looters.
mouth to be sure to
1921.
stop me, because she could
The
tell I was
original
fixing to
looters.
holler because it hurt.
People are shooting
Look.
guns and killing people and all. If we don't leave, they'll do us that way.
Many eyewitnesses report that planes dropped what I'll call incendiary devices on the community. So these would have been
planes,
nitroglycerin or
goddamn.
kerosene
Planes or
bombs that
helicopters,
caused
goddamn it.
the flames to
Boats,
spread
ships,
more
and
rapidly
none of that
and
shit,
burn
goddamn
more
it.
brilliantly. So this had a devastating impact on the community.
Men came in and started shooting in. I do remember a lot of people being murdered.
These people escape their homes. Some are shot down in the street, and others are gathered by the white mob and marched, in my grandfather's case, to the convention hall.
Look at that. Look at that.
They were stripped of their civil rights. Black men, women, and children were forced
I thought all
to
men was
leave
created
their
equal,
homes,
goddammit.
and they are
1776.
forced with their
We're in
hands raised to
1921,
walk,
goddammit.
to be
There's more
paraded
lynching going
through
on
the
than
streets.
anything, goddammit.
Taken to internment centers throughout the city.
That's a
Very
fact.
much like people of Japanese ancestry were interned during World War
Those
II.
constitutional rights didn't stand for us.
I would say it's not just a
Goddammit.
massacre.
Look at that.
This was intentional
Look at that.
and systematic. What occurred is a military-style assault
Terrorists.
on a civilian
It was
community.
terrorists. God damn it. They was terrorists, man.
Do you think about that day a lot, or do you try never to think about it?
Oh no, I think about it every day.
That's
I think
right.
it'll be something I'll never
Can't
forget.
that shit.
The people
Get on
getting
and believe
killed
that's that
had to
stupid
give
ass
up our
question.
home and all. And
She gonna always
I want
remember that
the world
shit.
to know I never want to see anything else like that anymore, and I hope it never happens again.
Ashes in its wake, but it also caused harm to generations of descendants who lost more than their ancestors and material wealth.
Hear that?
They lost a legacy of success that is hard to imagine or quantify.
Black Wall Street.
My earliest memory of hearing about the Dreamland Theater was in high school when my mother mentioned it to me. And it wasn't like she talked in depth about what happened. It was our family owned the Dreamland Theater. They were the first Black Tulsans to have a car, but how they lost everything was never really discussed. I'm Danya Backus, the CBS News correspondent and descendant of Black Wall Street. My great-great-grandparents, John and Lula Williams, owned the Dreamland Theater, the Williams Confectionery, and an auto garage. John and Lula Williams were the picture of the American dream. The Dreamland Theater was a 750-seat theater, and it did not just show silent movies, but apparently it had acts, they had boxing matches. My great-great-grandmother Lula actually had 2 other locations. So the Dreamland Theater was this entertainment hub for Tulsa, but it also was, I think, the beginning of an empire.
My name is John Rogers Jr. I'm the co-CEO of Ariel Investments, My ties to Tulsa start with the fact that my great-grandfather, J.B. Stratford, owned the Stratford Hotel that was burned down during the famous Tulsa Race Massacre 100 years ago.
Terrorists did that shit.
J.B. Stratford was an extraordinary entrepreneur, someone who had this knack of building businesses and creating enormous wealth. The Stratford Hotel at its peak was the largest African-American-owned hotel in the United States. Not only did it have this 54-room hotel that was very large for its time, but it had a pool hall, it had a cabaret, it had restaurants.
I'm Danya Backus in Tulsa, Oklahoma, uncovering the history of Black Wall Street.
To know that I am a part of this history and I'm able to tell the story, it has taken on a new meaning and responsibility for me. This is where the Dreamland Theater was,
yeah, right here.
And now it's a freeway. Even now, as I talk to elders of the family about what happened, even cousins who grew up in Tulsa, many of them are now just starting to put together all of the pieces. This is the pillar that pays homage to our family, the W.D. Williams. And when you ask, why wasn't it talked about, many of them don't know.
There's David Williams here.
The assumption is that it was just too painful to relive those memories. My great-grandfather, he did talk about it in the community, and he was one of the first survivors to be interviewed.
Woke up the next morning, all this shooting started over. You remember getting shot at when you ran across the street?
Oh yeah, you could hear bullets singing down the street.
Okay.
Hearing that firsthand, it hit me in a way that reading about it is one thing, but I think when you actually hear it, and you hear it from someone who you know is a part of your family, it impacts you differently.
My great-grandfather talks about, in his memoir, what really happened that day. He said, I was sitting in the window of the lobby looking westward. I saw an airplane approaching the hotel from the west. It came sailing like a huge bird in the direction of the hotel about 200 feet above the ground. And just before it reached the hotel, it swerved a little and fired through the transoms and plate windows. J.B. Stratford not only lost all of the property that he owned and the Stratford Hotel, but I think most importantly, psychologically, and I understand this as an entrepreneur, he'd put his heart and soul into that hotel. And to see it destroyed overnight was just gut-wrenching. And when he came to Chicago afterwards, he had these dreams of trying to recreate his success that he'd had in Tulsa. And to be able to build a new hotel and build new pool halls and have things that are successful. And he never was able to remotely achieve the success that he had in Tulsa.
W.D. Williams, my great-grandfather, talks about sleeping in a tent for about 6 months until they actually started rebuilding. The Dreamland Theater was rebuilt. The Williams building where the confectionery and where they lived, that was rebuilt. In order for them to be able to rebuild the Dreamland Theater on Black Wall Street, they had to basically sell the other 2 theaters. So they were able to rebuild, but it was never what it was pre the massacre. Hatred and jealousy wiped away our family's chance of generational wealth. I could have been an heir to an empire, and that was all wiped away.
I'm in the investment business and understand the magic of compound interest. That $125,000 hotel and the property that J.B. Stratford had in 1921, 100 years later would be worth well over $100 million. Broadly speaking, it would have been transformative for opportunities in our family. There's very little multi-generational wealth in the African American community. We haven't had that chance to be able to leave inheritances and have family members living off of the dividends of the work that their ancestors accomplished.
It makes me angry to know that so many people went out of their way to make sure that this history was not learned about. It makes me angry to know that my ancestors had to hold on to that trauma for so long as well. I do think we need to be talking about it more. I also do think that it's really scary to know and to feel like there are still some fears that I know they experienced that I still experience today. To know that that hatred and jealousy still lives in some people.
This idea that you could have this extraordinary success story where African Americans were fully participating in our capitalist democracy. No one at the time dreamed it could just all go away overnight. That it could be firebombed and destroyed. There's so many challenges that continue to face our community. We have to remember this history and inspire all of us to fight even harder for economic and social justice.
The Tulsa Massacre did not happen in a vacuum. Between 1917 and 1923, thousands of black people were killed, their homes and businesses destroyed, and as many as 26 race massacres across the country. In 1919, civil rights activist and writer James Weldon Johnson called it the Red Summer. That term came to represent an era of violence and bloodshed.
The Red Summer of 1919 was coined that because of the lynchings, because of the death of so many
It's
black
after slavery, yeah. It's after
In the years
slavery.
just prior to the Red Summer, there was almost 500,000 African Americans that came up in the first wave of the Great Migration.
You saw
More
black
lynching
people
and
fanning
killing
out from Mississippi
after
up to
slavery than
Chicago
ever.
and along the Delta, from Georgia and Alabama up to Detroit, from North Carolina up to New York, from Louisiana over to Los Angeles. And there was tremendous tension.
The massacres during the Red Summer weren't necessarily isolated to one part of the country. They really occurred in the South, New England, the Midwest, the Plains states, the Pacific Northwest. Racial violence can be seen in nearly every state in the Union.
Remember, 15 or thereabouts, with Birth of a Nation, a cinematic portrayal of black men with unrequited desire to rape white women they can't keep to themselves sexually. As a result of that, there's a buzz in the atmosphere. The Ku Klux Klan is on the rise.
You have the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, screening the film in the White House. This is the messaging that was coming from the White House.
After Negroes built the White
We have
House.
sent 2 million men
That was
overseas
the thanks,
and have suffered
goddammit.
350,000 casualties.
If
Was
black
the
people
birth of a
supported
nation.
the American war effort, perhaps
In
that
the
would
White House,
create
after
white
they built the
goodwill.
White House back.
Perhaps black people would experience an elevation in status in America.
Black men went off to World War I. They saw what could be. They understood the significance of democracy.
We see these black veterans returning to America expecting the same kind of freedom because they've been in defense of American democracy.
But what we saw was the opposite. Instead of white goodwill, we saw white lynch mobs and white mobs attacking black communities.
And one of the tensions was that you got a lot more black people in place when you came back than when you left. And what's that? Oh, they took my job? Oh, what's that? They're occupying space in the culture that used to be occupied by me financially and economically, in mills and in shops.
There was a great majority of white citizens who saw black people as, who are you to have that house, to have that college degree, to build that school, to not clean my house? Who are you to wear some of the finest clothes? It was more of, you're not supposed to have, but I am.
So whether it was these soldiers returning home, if it was African Americans that had attained some level of power, or that perhaps dated white women, any incidents that whites, and especially poor whites, considered to be kind of a threat to their territory was often a spurring factor.
One of the deadliest, quote-unquote, race riots occurred in Chicago.
In Chicago in 1919 was an African-American boy named Eugene Williams who had floated from what was considered black water into white water.
Eugene was swimming. He inadvertently crossed the 29th Street, barrier that separated black and white communities. Swimming.
and the white beachgoers ended up stoning him to death. And he was really just a child.
Because of the stoning to death set off several days of conflagration between white and black.
They were just yelling at us. All of a sudden, I heard my uncle say, "Here they come." And when he said that, it meant that the white folks were coming down 35th Street.
And 23 black people dead, 15 white people dead. Black people are not taking it lying down. Returning soldiers and veterans would grab their guns and rifles to defend themselves and to not be victims of violence in this country.
Even somewhere north and somewhere kind of considered progressive like Chicago still had these kind of invisible lines of where black people were allowed to be and not allowed to be. Elaine, Arkansas is a unique case. It's likely that over 200 people died in what's known as the Elaine Massacre. Many of the sharecroppers in the region were historically not given enough pay for their cotton when it came time to sell, and so they formed their own union, which was seen as an uprising by the local white landowners. So it became kind of a manhunt throughout the town and throughout the countryside. These are hardworking families that were being gunned down in the street for wanting to organize their labor and receive more equitable pay.
Black people became target practice. Women, children, men, until the military came in and brought it to a halt. There was a hearing afterward of African American men accused of starting this event. And it took the NAACP to come in and to fight for them so that they ultimately were given their freedom.
You can drive through Rosewood, Florida in about 15 seconds, with no clue about the ugly American story that happened here.
In Rosewood, Florida, 1923, a man was accused of attempting to rape a white woman. The result was that a group of white citizens went to confront this man at his home, the threat of violence and death, and ultimately they destroyed the entire black community.
You could hear them shooting. You could hear people screaming, hollering. You could see fire burning, the light from the fire from a distance. We knew that what they was doing. They was burning up people's homes and killing them.
There was a thriving black community in this Rosewood area, and they killed several people, and many of the people had to leave their homes and run to the railroad tracks. And ultimately, many of the people who were killed were buried in mass grave.
But I still can't figure out yet the reason for them to burn our home. Because my mother was there with 6 kids.
A lot of the information that we're learning about these incidents are from oral histories of people that were there. We thought there was maybe 24 events during the Red Summer. We now know of almost 40.
What happens during Red Summer of 1919, none of that should be a surprise, and even where we are today, because the issue of race is still a lingering issue in this nation.
How did Tulsa deal with the aftermath of the killing and destruction on May 31st and June 1st? Black and white Tulsans did not talk about the massacre for different reasons, but off and on, there was a rebuilding.
I would describe the rebuilding of Greenwood immediately after the race massacre as one of the great heroic stories in American history. Can you imagine having your business and your home destroyed and the people who do it are never prosecuted, never held accountable?
There wasn't much left but smoldering embers. Fortunately, though, the human spirit reigned supreme.
The same men who just lost their own loved ones, lost their own businesses, those individuals came back to worship and they restored our basement. And our basement was a central hub until the rest of Greenwood was developed.
Immediately after the massacre, there was an effort by the city to extend the fire code, which would have made it cost prohibitive for many people to rebuild in the community. Fortunately, we had a lawyer in the community called B.C. Franklin. B.C. Franklin challenged those efforts to extend the fire code successfully. He represented a number of massacre victims with their legal claims as well. So the community fought on every front to rebound and to rebuild.
Federal troops were sent to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921 to put down race riots that had ended in the destruction of the Negro section of the city.
The city labeled what happened a riot instead of what it was, which was a massacre.
This was not just some casual journalistic term that was tossed around. It was done explicitly to keep us from getting the needed funds to rebuild.
Those insurance companies did not pay out on those policies due to the fact that the event was classified as a riot versus being a massacre. Many of the families who had businesses outside of Tulsa, like the Dreamland Theater, they had a couple of locations outside of Tulsa as well, they were able to have money, income to come in. However, all of the businesses in Greenwood who had insurance, they did not get paid out due to these events.
We now have minutes from the Chamber of Commerce from that era, from the City Commission, and what you see in the days immediately after it happened was widespread recognition by city leaders throughout the community that this was a major source of shame and embarrassment for our city, and the best way for Tulsa to be able to move forward was just not to talk about it at all, to act like it never happened.
I used to be a reporter for the CBS affiliate here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I remember going, how come nobody's talking about this? This used to be the West Archer lunchroom right here. It's the only remembrance, but if you look up what used to be the lunchroom is now the minor league ballpark.
When we say the Greenwood community, we have to be very clear that what existed at the time of the massacre was 40 blocks. Now that's down to half a block.
Well, I think there are two phases in the history of Greenwood that you have to focus on. There's the immediate aftermath of the race massacre, and there is rebuilding in that period of time. But then you have urban renewal hit Tulsa in the 60s and the 70s, and that's the time when you see entire neighborhoods bulldozed, which are still vacant land today. That's when you see a highway built right through the middle of Greenwood that's still there today.
As a reporter, you notice it. Why are the folks who live in North Tulsa not as affluent as the folks who live in South Tulsa?
And what we see happening in much of Greenwood south of the highway is not black owned. We see a lot of development, a lot of what they call gentrification. I like to call it what it is, land theft.
A lot of land was stolen from us. Then you burn us down and we rebuild accordingly. And then you come and tear us back down. I mean, current day, our whole goal is to protect and preserve what we currently have.
In order for the city to receive their upgrades, they had to...
When I came to the Greenwood district, there really wasn't much going on. Not nearly as much that's going on now. There's new buildings going up. I just don't know how much of the black community has any influence on what goes up.
They're building white-owned businesses that are going to benefit white Tulsans and not the black community, which has been pushed further out north into a community that has not received any investment for decades.
I actually own and operate Rose Tax Solutions, and we're a full-service boutique firm located right on Greenwood Avenue, across the street from my dad. He has a bail bonds company, and 2 doors down from my nieces who operate a restaurant, Wanda J's, and across the street from a coffee shop where my cousin is a co-owner.
We have 26 black-owned businesses in those buildings. So to go from 600 in 1921 to 26 is nowhere near what we had.
For black businesses and leaders not to be in place in order to actually get contracts accepted to build and construct again, you take away a lot from a group of individuals who cannot build, who don't have that same opportunity. That's our goal, is to own. We don't want to keep renting.
How weird would it be if they build this up and everybody comes to see Black Wall Street, but it doesn't have that feel of Black Wall Street? Say, in the rebuilding of what was theirs that they originally built up.
Now, I go to City Hall every Wednesday since September 2018. Every Wednesday, to let the world know we demand reparations now.
Different people define reparations in different ways. There's the more traditional idea of cash payments to people. The challenge with that for me is where that cash comes from. So I don't support that. But then there's a different definition of reparations, which is acknowledging the disparities that do exist and working to reconcile those and
Get the
address
hell
the
out of here, man.
underlying
Everybody else got
causes of
reparated.
those
Did y'all say that to the Jews,
We're not
goddammit?
seeking a specific number in the lawsuit.
Did you
We're
say
just
that to the
simply asking
Koreans,
that the court
goddammit?
give us the opportunity to bring in the experts to tell the court and the world what would it take to put the community back where it would have been but for the massacre and the continuing harm.
To have it look like it did back before they destroyed it, before they put this interstate highway through the heart of our Greenwood community. That's what it looks like to me. A self-contained
terrorists
place of black entrepreneur excellence.
Man, a true rebuild would be where we own the land, we're able to build, we're circulating the dollar, it's inclusive, we're just booming again, and we're thriving, and we have like that strong community. That would be amazing for Tulsa.
In 2019, Oklahoma passed a law requiring the Tulsa Race Massacre to be taught in schools. That is a huge step forward for Tulsans, both black and white.
Have they been
who grew
talking
up
about it
never
in
knowing
school?
what happened nearly
Like them?
100 years before. One thing is clear, though. It's important, very important, to dig up the past in order to realize a better future.
Fuck that. Where the reparations at now, goddammit? We can do this Black History thing for the rest of the year. Goddammit, 365 years I'll come up here with a different video.
We're hopeful to build something that actually sustains throughout the generations to come.
Building Greenwood Rising, this history center that's going to open to tell the story in an immersive way and to connect the dots so that people understand that our history is really not simply something that's in the past, it's part of our present.
In order for our children to know what happened here, what their ancestors did or suffered from, it has to be taught.
Well, I'm so thankful that the state is including this in their curriculum. It's important to understand our past and to understand what happened and to have people be able to learn the lessons from that event. But then moving forward, I also think it's so important that this be taught in schools because what happened here in 1921 could absolutely happen again today.
So we have to dig deep and understand our history. And that's what the future has to be about. Knowing it, acknowledging it, and learning each other's history. That's why the excavations of the graves is so important. It is vitally important for the healing of our community that those bodies be laid to rest in peace, not having been dumped in a mass grave by some stranger that didn't know who they were.
Mayor Bynum decided to restart the investigation for mass graves. He should have. If there are mass graves, we need to know about that. We need to answer these historical questions.
I think it's one of the most fundamental things that any American city promises its citizens is, if you're murdered in our city, we will do everything we can to find out what happened to you and to render justice for your family.
It requires, ultimately, identification of the remains and connections with heirs of those people who are victims. And finally, it requires reinterment appropriately of those remains. So this is a complex, tedious process, but it's worth the effort.
We can't go back in time and prevent the race massacre from having happened in 1921, but we can be a better city in 2021 by trying to find these graves, hoping to be able to use DNA evidence to ultimately connect them with the descendants, and finally, a century too late, be able to tell the descendants of these victims where their remains are and let them decide what's done with them.
Why do you think that you lived that day?
Quite a few of us had made it through this, so I guess it was God's will.
The only way Tulsa can heal from the massacre is to provide adequate and comprehensive reparations and to ensure that everything that was broken is repaired, abated, made whole. Anything else besides that is just talk.
I want them to give us what we're rightfully owed so that we can build a legacy, a strong, sustainable legacy for our children's children's children.
Historically, black Tulsans have not had the same advantages as white Tulsans, and we want to be a city moving forward where that's not the case, where everybody has an equal shot at great life, but that requires a tremendous amount of work over a sustained period of time. And so right now what we're trying to do is put in place the programs and processes that allow that work to continue and close that opportunity gap that's been allowed to exist in our city for way too long.
When you think about this now, 100 years later, 2021, stories like this are a valuable weapon against the amnesia that clogs the veins of American culture.
We're starting to feel like change is coming, and we're optimistic there's going to be more equal economic opportunity for African Americans in this country.
I see Tulsa having promise, and I see Tulsa being able to turn this situation into something that provides economic opportunity to the people who were impacted by the massacre. The entrepreneurial spirit of Greenwood still lives on in Tulsa. And Tulsa's at a point now where they can really write a new chapter in this history.
Next, the future of Tulsa speaks.
Imagine being me, a 17-year-old young black man, on the dawn of his high school graduation.
A ray of light in the darkness of the Tulsa massacre of 1921, it was this. The only building left standing in Greenwood was the segregated Booker T. Washington High School. That school has since been rebuilt. So it seems only fitting that we leave you tonight with words from a graduating senior. His name is Garrett Bland. He's 17 years old. We hope his thoughts and tonight's broadcast will move and inspire you. I'm Gail King. Good night.
Picture this. It's May 31st, 1921. Imagine being me, a 17-year-old young black man, on the dawn of his high school graduation from the Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But that graduation did not happen. Why, you may ask? Because on that night, Black Wall Street, my community, the most successful black-owned area in the country, was destroyed. It was burned to the ground, and hundreds of black lives, my people, were lost in this horrible massacre. It's scary to think that on that day, the quickest way to lose your life was to live in Tulsa and have melanin in your skin. In the words of my favorite Broadway play, Hamilton, youths who dies and who tells your story. And for 100 years, Tulsa's story has not been told. Instead, it was Tulsa's dirty little secret that no one talked about. But today, 100 years later, history has its eyes on Tulsa. So now, we remember the past and reflect on that day. We make an honest attempt to acknowledge what happened here and try to rebuild and restore what once was. Finally, we rise. We rise to repair the damage. We rise to educate, to ensure that future generations know what happened here. We rise to the occasion to do what's right. We rise to the call for action. We rise from the ashes. We rise to reclaim our history.
Is that love for you or hate? Is that love for you or hate?